Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome here to our second webinar here with Agris Academy. This is in a partnership here with RJO Futures, which is a StoneX company, and also with Agris Academy, an educational company a lot of you are familiar with, and some of you aren't. But this is our second webinar here in a series that we're doing. And this one's going to focus on the four best farm investments of 2025. My name is Michael Sabo. I'm a senior market strategist with RJO, and I've been in the industry now for about 29 years. Obviously, here at RJO and StoneX, what we do on our end here is we work with producers with their futures and options accounts. And if you have any questions as it pertains to that, and happy to answer those questions and help you guys out with that. Jeff introduced himself. Jeff and I got to know each other here. It's been over 15 years that we've worked together, and have helped him with his grain merchandising and hedging needs here at RJO, and also former Lynn Waldock here. So we've gotten to know each
That was
other.
my first year farming, so it's been more
Yeah.
than 15, my
It's
friend. You're
been,
getting
yeah,
you're
it's been a
getting
long
old.
time.
Yep.
And get the pleasure here to meet Mike. And both of these gentlemen started Agris Academy. And so I'll turn it over here now to Mike, and he can introduce himself, and then we'll dive right in.
Yeah, Mike Rolfson, co-founder together with Jeff at Agris Academy. Thanks again. We've kind of gone through this already before, so in the spirit of going through the presentation, I won't go into anything. But again, just a big thanks to RJO and StoneX for putting this on, and look forward to the next 57 minutes here. So.
Just getting kicked off for those of you who are new to Agris Academy, we set this business up, the two of us, 3 years ago. It is 100% focused on education and consulting in the areas of merchandising, risk management, best practice. We are not a broker. We're not an advisor. We really focus down on the education, both on the farm side. We have a very large farm practice, and on the commercial side. And by default, we do a fair amount of farm business consulting as part of the one of those practices. And we just thought this would be a very interesting topic to kick it off, because we do see some really interesting projects and how we look at them. And Mike and I have a significant background in mergers and acquisitions for Cargill back in the day, finance, and how to evaluate projects. So we thought we'd share those tonight. And with that, we're going to let Mike take over here.
Here's the typical disclaimer on this, but yeah, I just need to quick flash that as we go into the presentation. So just to repeat a little bit about what Jeff said, we are teachers, we educate, we consult, and the core of our focus is in merchandising and risk management. Together, we had about 50 years in Cargill. I mean, probably 80+% of the outside of the tropical and soft stuff. Jeff and I have traded it somewhere in the world, and we really try to tailor our education to be beyond just the rote merchant type stuff, or marketing, often referred to as marketing, especially in universities type stuff, to make it very practical and actionable and convert to real dollars to our producer customers. And we focus on these little details and win in them over and over and over again, and stack those nickels and dimes, and teaching you to function like a merchant, just like we did back in our day. That's our mission for being. So as Jeff mentioned, we have a sizable retained practice. Sometimes those retained practices come organically, where people just come to us and say, help me, teach me right now. And we roll our sleeves up and do that. But a fair amount of our retained practice comes out of our merchant master class. So we're all speaking off the same script sheet when we go to really, again, rolling our sleeves up and getting into the details, very specific to their operation, and teaching them further details, and perfecting ideas a little bit more, but also getting very much into the weeds of their operation. And with 100% frequency, we go into the aspect of where to deploy capital. And we came across these four. We come across a lot of others, and as Jeff said, we bring financial rigor to this as well, where it's more than just kind of back of the envelope. We help build models. We can do all kinds of different return metrics for our producers so they can really understand the best use of that capital and versus, alternatives that are maybe ways they've done it before. So in no particular order, these are the four on our list: bagging versus bins, bin control systems, farm direct fertilizer, which is really defined by looking at ways to tailor your grain outlets to then allow you to access inexpensive fertilizer direct to you, where you pocket that entire difference. And if you do that math in the right circumstances at the right time of the year, it can be extremely interesting. And we'll go through an example that we did in Southern Illinois recently in detail. And then, of course, investing in yourself, investing in education, create knowledge assets in your group that pay off forevermore with what's in your brain and your team's brain. So,
I think I've heard this elsewhere, and I think I'm gonna have to credit all the way back to Brian Hefty's dad, who he quotes. A lot of businesses don't fail not because they didn't have good price, they just didn't have enough capital. And I think as farms, there are a lot of good projects, right? When you work on a farm and you've got a lot of constituents, and bringing some of that discipline, and we start to look down into how to rank and how to deploy. How much, you've got some debt, you've got some equity. Where do you want to invest? And we really are bringing the rigor that we used to bring in corporate America onto the farm. It's just like our merchandising classes, and a lot of our stuff here, right, is an offshoot of commodity movement, whether it's raw material input or raw material output or processing, make the top projects. I think I'm going to
so
take over. Or are you want to
well,
run with this way?
I'll tee up, and again, I will defer to the genuine professional, that being the Jeff Kazin on this, because Jeff saw the opportunity this summer, pivoted very quickly, and capitalized on it beautifully, and then lived it by actually running with this equipment. So I was pure spectator sport on this, but I'll tee it up and then let Jeff get into the details. So, I don't want to use maybe the word controversial, but we had probably our biggest ex post dialogue. I don't know, was it about 3 weeks ago, Jeff? And you can refer to it at our handle there
Yep.
at
Stirring
Agris
the pot.
Academy. Yeah. And there's a lot of passion around the topic, bins versus bagging, and myth, and then the math that come to the surface when you really get into the weeds on this. And there's no doubt that when people talk about the intangibles of bins and the tangibles of bins, there's value. But we sometimes more than sometimes, we always try to go with an open mind and push our clients to occasionally think of things that are a little bit out of the box that might create a different vector of value for them that they hadn't thought about before. So, and the real driver here, if you look at a fully finished, brand new, beautiful bin setup, you're talking what, Jeff, around $3 a bushel equivalent?
Just for the base, that we call it the cost per bushel, uh, and that includes everything. We get lots of people, so I can do it for this or that, and they usually leave a few pieces out. We call it conveyance, and the bin and everything you need to fill that bin. You're looking at right around $3 a bushel. We look at lots of projects in the last 12 months. When it really gets down to it, that's what it comes out to. I mean,
Yeah, and
pieces,
if you look at
parts are other
yeah.
are we can do a little, and that's for pretty good size bins, right? 100 plus thousand. You get smaller, the costs go up. I think the last one we looked at a farm was a new bean processing bin, and I think it was closer to $5 before we were done. But it's obviously doesn't have the scale economy. And then, of course, this was a processing bin. It had a few bells and whistles on it.
Yeah. And if you get $3 in your head and you look at through the lens of a merchant, i.e., what type of blend and processing margin can you pocket yourself? How much basis carry and board carry can you realistically capture net of your cost to get there? And if you refer to our first class, we went into detail and used some tools on showing you what your genuine cost to carry is, and you put a discount on that, for your opportunity cost of your money. It really, to get to $3 in that, it's going to take a very long time. So that's again, that's our big picture thing, and don't throw too many tomatoes at us, but where we start the discussion around alternative ways to look at it. And bagging requires that thought and open mind, and certainly you need the right circumstances. You're not going to do this in the Delta, and where it's hot and humid all the time, and that kind of thing. But there, depending upon the spread in your operation and your existing storage capacity and the typical carries you see, and the number of bodies you got in your operation, there could be some interesting reasons to think more about this. So let's get a little more into the details.
Sure. And I think that the tip off for me was if I just said I've got a 7% interest rate to borrow money or capital and I have a $3 per bushel bin, it's going to cost me 21 cents just in interest across that thing, right? And I'm not sure that's the right number. It's really should probably be a little higher than that, but at 7%, 21 cents. And we already knew because I own a bagger, and we'll tell you a little story there. It's 2 years worth. This is our second season with it. It's that light. And I think many of you that are on here that understand what's going on in the farm community, we have inflation on our raw materials, particularly labor, by the way, machinery, very high inflation rates, and our output isn't inflating. And I think bins have just done that, the same thing. They have inflated because there's steel, concrete, labor are big pieces of that puzzle. They're inflating faster than their returns. So it's kind of a microcosm of what we're seeing in the overall production space in the U.S., where we're getting inflating raw or inflating input materials, and the returns are generally fixed, and we're struggling. So what are our alternatives? And the one we went down through is bagging. I'll just tell you that the story is 2 years ago, Mike and I were at a client in Illinois. It was August. We had a tough time with our elevator. We have a very good country elevator right over the hill from us. It had always been very competitive, but they couldn't dump us. They got behind and struggled to stay with us, and that's really doesn't work for a modern harvesting unit. And on the flip side, they were getting larger. He's a very young producer, working with a lot of older bin sites and things that people didn't necessarily want to use anymore, and just battling it out with labor. And his local elevator was full of old crop corn in August.
Before harvest.
Before harvest,
Already
right?
full.
So he looked at me and said, I'm going to have a bagger to get through the year. He had a record crop in the field. And I looked at him and I said, buy two, excuse me. And we did. So we broke this out into some of these efficiencies. Now you'll get some of these efficiencies if you have a bin, right? And some of you want, but obviously we're going to zip down through them because I don't think you want to sit here too long. But there's just, this is kind of the non-cash thing. So obviously, bagging equipment costs a lot less. I think you could say $100,000 will get you an entire system. That's the bagger and what we call the reclaimer. You don't have to have trucks at harvest. You can bag in the field if you want. Just depends. There's lots of ways to use this cat. They are extremely fast. The modern systems, we have an Akron reclaimer running here behind us. That's actually what we own. They will take grain as fast as you can dump it from a grain cart. We learned kind of from one of our past students. He was in a very competitive area in central Iowa. A lot of ground is controlled by land management companies, and he's concerned about putting that much money in fixed bin systems because he could lose acres pretty quickly. But he runs very fast. They run 2 carts, 2 Class 8 combines, and 1 bagger, and they know how to do it. We found, this is from my own experience, the grain handling is very gentle. So relative to, say, lifting through an auger or up a leg and dropping it, we had very low FM or very low splits. We have some clients that talk about you don't have to climb legs. You don't have to walk into bins with sweeps or clean them. It's pretty nice. There are no fans, obviously. You get what you put in, it just comes out. So it also doesn't dry it, by the way, which is maybe you call that down. Super flexible hours, right? Our local elevator isn't open on a Sunday. We can farm on a Sunday if we have to. We can farm through the night if we want to. So that's a big plus. We can bag in the field. We do. Obviously, you can see from this picture, these were the first bags we put down last year. We see some of the largest farms that we deal with and or have interactions with are using bags at the bin site. So they're drawing off cool, dry grain out of the grain system. They're bringing the grain carts home, and it's a cloudy morning or lousy rainy day. They will bag dry grain at the bin site to augment their storage capacity. It's not a finite capacity. A 500-foot bag will put 25,000 bushels of good corn in it. Obviously, it can fluctuate a little bit, but you can see you can just lay them out. We know that like even tonight there's a spot just north, an hour northeast of St. Louis, and they have 1.5 million bushels. The whole 40 acres behind the elevator is rows of bags. There's no property taxes. There's very low maintenance to go with these things. And part of our decision, I'm a relatively small farm, is if it doesn't work out, if you tried it and for reasons, there is a skill to it, it doesn't work for your farming, you can resell the stuff. You can't resell a bin. And then there is some opportunities for some custom work. There are a few custom baggers up popping out, and it doesn't work great out of the field in the field, although it could, but it works really well if you're going to bag at somebody's bin site and you're just going to bring in some carts. And as I said, you can, as fast as you can get it into the cart and bring it over to the bagger and drop it, you can really make time. So lots of efficiency or ways to skin this cat as an alternative to your traditional bins, which along with the technology and of course the speed at which we want to harvest has made this more and more of a viable alternative. I'm going to run through this math. This is legit math. This is part of my experience. Now, we didn't have any quality problems. We put good dry corn in these bags last year. Most of that corn came out. I think our average was number one yellow, 60.5 pounds, 0.5 FM. Yeah, it was 15 something moisture, 15.4, 15.5 moisture. Corn was probably a little over dry. This came straight in the field. These bags behind us are actually from this year, just laid out here maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. Legitimately cost, because everybody talks about what the cost is. This is what we think is economic cost to bagging. You might be able to drive that down a little bit if you use bigger bags. You get good at it, but we've just had some experience that, if you have a partial bag or something like that. And our additional cost, because we're going to do kind of a 3-month exercise, because most of the good carry is the first 90 days post-harvest or around harvest is where that prime carry market is. We use 7% annual interest on grain, which is basically where we're seeing some of these operating lines at. We always put some shrink in there because you always have some shrink. It doesn't matter whether you're going into a bin or a bag. So we put a little bit of shrink in there, and you get your total 3-month cost at about 24 cents. That's legit. That's my experience. It's nice that in this case, I actually tried the product. What we saw 2 years ago was the cost versus this revenue stream, which was actually more dramatic 2 years ago. We were going to be able to pay for that bagger in the first year, and we did. The way I've got it laid out here is that we've got a spread between the hedges and your Dees board to your March board, which is very common. At the time, it's 18 cents. When we put this slide together, it's a little less than that today. We figured that basis will appreciate 30 cents roughly in the first 3 months. I think most of you have experienced that this year. We eliminate a haul from the field to the elevator or the field to the farm if we're bagging in there. We pencil that in. Actually, we have that custom done. It costs us 8 cents a bushel, so we can haul it straight from the field to the end processor. We cut out that haul. That's a revenue source. There's no local margin. Like if we hauled it to a local elevator, they would have a margin in there. We call that 7 cents in the net. We know that if we put our volume together, right, we pile it together, and we can effectively auction off, right? If we have it sitting in storage or headed to a local elevator, there's no incentive for them to push on those bids or try to move grain one way or another. We put 5 cents in it. That's probably conservative. We've seen, depends upon the scale and the time of year, but that can get to be 10, 15, or 20 cents in that push for volume if you can aggregate your volume on the farm. And then we're going to allude to this about off-season freight, but freight gets cheaper in the off-season. And we also gives us a little more time to hunt down some backhauls, which can be super lucrative. So all these are pretty legit. Obviously, you can debate all of them, pluses or minuses, but we had 73 cents in revenue in this example. That gave you $49 or 49 cents per bushel. We always like to use the 200 bushel number for easy figuring, so that's $98 an acre. Or on 1,000 acre corn, it's $98,000. And if you remember how I started this conversation, you can generally get that system. And I bet you if you pre-ordered with them, the country generally ran out of them this fall with the big
Yeah, there's a
crop
big
and
demand this year.
big demand. We had a lot of damaged space in the Dakotas from a derecho. And then obviously just a big crop coming at us with some big carries. Um, it's roughly 100,000 with all the bells and whistles. There's bag rollers and some other things I've got included in there to make it a full system and different systems and different companies. So that's a legit, right? When we're farming and you look at how tight margins are, um, that's what we saw. And that actually played out. Last year, we paid for all the bagging, the bagger, which is a less expensive item, and part of the reclaimer. And this year we'll finish it off and we'll own that. And like I said, if unlike a bin, we like it as an investment because it has liquidity. We talk to farms. If for some reason it doesn't work for your farm, your area, the way you run your operation, but gosh, there's a lot of ways we've seen it skinned. It's very flexible, and we could sell out of that position. It has liquidity, and for me as a small farm, it was interesting enough that we knew we were going to have this thing paid back in probably the whole system in 2 years, which will happen for sure already. And remind you that none of this is about futures. This is all how a grain elevator would look at it. We're not saying to spec on futures to make this thing work. This is just pick your December price and start earning carry like an elevator to get this to this level. We don't include futures because of Mike and I. If you take Clash, you'll understand we're very committed to these futures markets that we enjoy in the U.S. are very efficient. From harvest, it could go down or up as a futures market. Any questions right now on the bagging side?
Yeah, but the chat is open, folks. Don't be shy in putting your questions in there. We'd
Yeah,
happily get to them.
just click on this chat and start typing.
And then just go back to the original point, however way you'd want to discount a comparable uh, carry, and obviously not with all the economics captured as you would in bags in some of those points. But if you just took the generic carry and the in and out of your bins in a regular bin site, you're probably talking a 10-year payback. Probably, Jeff, is that fair?
Yeah, the last one we did was 3 or 4%. It could be a little bit more if we can
Yeah.
push on a few.
Hmm.
We could add some of these ancillary ones that would apply to both. I mean,
Sure,
there's a lots
sure.
of way that you can. Yeah, bins are tight. The fact is this 13 cents is what sets me off. I
Yeah. And
can't pay the interest bill on $3 a bushel bag,
yeah,
bags.
whereas, we're talking safely a 2 to 3 year payback on this even if you were to shave some of this economics off. So, and as Jeff said, a very flexible asset that if you don't need it anymore, you can pitch it. Or if you get really good at it, we didn't talk too much about this, but you get really good at it, it might add some custom opportunities for you to add a little extra revenue also. So,
Yeah.
did I see a question come in?
No, those are our test questions, but I just went ahead and jumped down here and looked at the chat. It's easy enough. You click on
Uh-huh.
chat and click in for everybody who's on.
Under it came under
Go ahead.
Q&A. It could have been you, Jeff, but the useful life of bagging equipment versus bin.
Well, I haven't really tested it. I'll be honest with you. I would guess there's really not much to them. Once you get right
Yeah, there's
down
not a
to
lot of moving parts. There
it's
really isn't.
hydraulically. We have an Akron system which was recommended to us by a student, and it's hydraulic motors, some very basic augers which would be replaceable, and bearings which are very easily gotten to. And it would be millions and millions of bushels before you'd wear one out, in my opinion. And I think the cost of replacing the wear parts would be minimal. I think the only thing we want to add to ours is a camera on the reclaimer so it can become a two-person load operation. It's a little tricky to have one in the truck. You need one in the truck, one in the watching up top, and one running the bagger. But we can load a truck. We could load a truck in 10 minutes and we never ran it faster than half speed on a 540. Grain comes up fast. And so and obviously if you were loading it into a grain cart, it would be a lot easier. You don't have to be as accurate. But yeah, we didn't have a problem. We talked with the several students, what about if it gets muddy? And they said, well, if it's a muddy day, we're bringing grain carts to the field and we load on the road. If this was field loaded and if it's dry, we'll pull the trucks right up underneath it and go with it. And, everybody knows it's not as nice as, having a bin site for sure. There are a lot of good things about having the steel there in a site where you can stay warm. And there'll be days it's terrible to do bags, and there'll be days where it's just beautiful and we're cutting a lot of cost out. In farms that we've seen farms that have older grain systems, the augmentation piece is super interesting. Particularly, Mike and I work with a lot of young farms, and they have only a finite amount of capital, and they need this, right? They need those earnings, and they're willing to work, and they can go out there and make this thing work and augment. Like if you only have a 500 bushel an hour dryer, it's going to be a long haul to get to stay ahead of it. But if you can bag some 20 moisture corn, which we do, and then as soon as harvest is over, you're continuing to haul that corn and dry it, right? It augments a system that's older, right? And you don't have to pour that money into it. We still approve projects that have bins in them, but they tend to be associated with value-added further processing. Drying corn
Yeah,
is a
that's what
value-added
gets you.
further
Yeah.
processing, and we're going to talk a little bit about value-added further processing. But just to
Couple.
put in,
Yeah.
just to
Sorry.
put in, just to put in space to store commodities has not been paying are not paying enough.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
And couple quick questions, Jeff. Did you answer super quick here? How many people to load and unload a bag?
Depends on how good you are at it. There's an art to doing bagging. We learned a lot of stuff the hard way. We are in the East. There are not very many people bagging in the East. We didn't get a lot of help to start and watching some YouTube videos. But I've seen guys out in Nebraska combine by themselves. It's not very efficient. Um, as I said, I think you really want one person. It's worth having one person run the bagger and keep the stretch right and keep an eye on things. And every time that cart comes up, hit the PTO and make sure it's nice and straight and stretching right. One in the cart and one in the combine. We had a client in Illinois that was carting, if you got the really right, they were running two combines in one cart. I think the cart guy would die, but today's combines, but you can do it. It just depends upon how you want to scale, but you can easily have a three-person harvesting operation running, 3,000 bushels an hour. Um, I spent some time running the combine this fall, and just, it's hard to keep trucks to keep up with that kind of speed and the number of trucks you need and the number of drivers. So a lot of ways to skin it, depends upon what you're trying to do. The fastest thing we see is people bring the wet corn home because it's the biggest downfall of bags is you can't put wet grain in them. You can't put hot grain in them. We learn, we've obviously experienced that. You don't want to do it for very long. And the way people have been getting around that is they haul the grain home, dry it, 25% moisture. They get it down, they get it cooled, and then they're using draw offs or top load bins and their load out bins, and they're very quickly filling bags at home. And just if they need the space, they bag it, and if they don't, the bagger um, sits inside and doesn't. It's just a threat.
Yeah, which answers your question to Andrew about drying and corn bagging. We see a lot of people who dry at the bin site and just fill their bags. Um, and Richard, you asked a question about getting down to 17, 18 moisture. Sorry, coming out of the field. Jeff, 17, 18 moisture coming out of the field in Wisconsin, you should be okay putting that in the bag, right?
For us. Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. I think the key is air temperature. In Wisconsin, not a problem. We did have a client that first year. It was plus 20% moisture, and it was 80 degrees in southern Illinois. Do not put grain in the bag uh, for very long at those, because what happens is moisture moves around inside the bag. It's trapped, but the amount of humidity and the amount of moisture in the corn starts to move around, and it ends up in the bottom of the bag.
Mhm.
Like I said, we definitely had water. moisture, you could see it and it goes settles all the way to the bottom of the bag. But if you have a pile of grain that's 5.5 feet tall or 6 feet tall, and there's 1 inch of moist grain in the very bottom, it just blends right off. So that's our experience. Cool grain is important. Don't put hot grain out of the dryer in a bag. They'll have the same problem. So when we are looking at a site right now, we're looking at a site project uh, for a farm, and it's capital is tight. This is a lifetime decision. It's the right power, the right gas. It's a dump pit that can take an entire semi. It's the right size wet bin with space to grow. It's the right size dryer capacity, and it's two relatively small bins that are going, one is dumping hot grain and one is cooling grain off. And the plan is, at least now, to bag off of it. The site will be expandable. If we want to put more steel for various reasons, we would. But, this is a farm that, there's a lot of things we need to spend money on. We've got to do something on the grain system side this year. And, we've really started from scratch. And that's where we're thinking is, and I think he said that bill is still going to be something like $750,000. So,
Yeah.
and obviously a lot of that's still in the design phase, so I don't know where we're going to get to by the end. But we like it as an augmentation, and we see it. We have a client who bought one bagger, and I don't know that they're going to use it this year. The markets, they were able to merchandise. They're a longtime student and now a retained client, and they merchandised their way around it and really didn't need to use it as much this year. Now they'll use it next year because of their rotation and where they're farming. But sometimes the best thing to do with a bagging unit is stick it in the barn and not use it. Sometimes a bin, the best thing is to store air. We call it sailboat fuel. So when you get to be a really good merchant, Mike, you'll hear Mike and I talk as your merchandising skills get better, you actually tend to use and need less storage. We
Jeff,
okay?
another quick question. Explain how you handled your little homegrown solution on keeping the critters away from your bags.
Well, I mean, we we don't um, we don't live in wide open farming country.
Yeah, there's
So first thing,
plenty of critters in Southwest Ohio and hill
yeah.
country.
So what happens is first is you put the bag out in the fields, away from cover. That's kind of stage one is what we did. I was like, well, if we have three bags lined up and we've got whatever, ours are smaller, but 50,000 bushels of corn, spend $200 to put a little electric fence and a charger. And that we did that. So we put about some shin high electric fence around it, a few steel posts, a few push in posts around the outside of the bag site, and let the solar charger do it thing. And we didn't have any large critter issues. We had, some small mouse holes in some places. Some people sprinkle lime around them. They say the mice don't like to get their feet caustic. I don't know if it worked. We didn't do that. We didn't really have trouble, but we have lots of deer. We have lots of coyotes, and my nemesis is the trash panda, the raccoons, and we actually did not have. You kind of like the coyotes will, they'll keep an eye on things that want to sit out there and try to eat through those bags. That's there, especially if you put them out in the field. We didn't have a problem. We've heard stories of, if you get heavy snow and you're up in the Dakotas and there's nothing to eat for, the bags will pile in with snow and the deer will walk down the top of them, punch holes in them. And I mean, yeah, you got to pay attention to bags. It's not quite as nice, but then I think a client also told us you can have problems in grain in bins,
Sure.
big problems. And so
Yeah.
we took a little preventative. I think one of our clients is Zoe Kent. If you guys are out on social media, Farm with Zoe, she's got a bag. Another client of ours actually went and did for her on a custom basis, and I think they sprinkled something around the bags. I didn't even ask her to try to keep the critters away. But yeah, every space is a little different, and how long you keep them in. Most of the carry is going to be earned in the first 90 days. So you could generally start picking those bag ups. But if you're in North Dakota and it's January 1st, it's pretty miserable to go out and pick up a bag if you can even find it, right? Depending upon how much snow it is. So you got to be smart about it, right? This is a tool just like a new tool on the farm, and it's been a learning curve for us to get the bags. You can tear a bag. We tore a bag. It was our fault. Any problem we've had with bagging has been self-inflicted. But this is an Argentine system, It's just gotten very modern, I think, from the first and the original baggers as to how fast they work and they can keep up with what we want to do with a class 7, class 8 type combine. You can go in and get yourself set up and get your crew running and really motor through a lot of corn in a hurry. And corn's obviously the big problem, just the yields and the speed at which we want to harvest.
And how late did you hold your bag till, Jeff? Again, your last bag was like May almost?
April, we actually
April.
pulled
Yeah.
pulled
So,
the last bag in April, and it was we actually had, I'll be honest, we did take a discount on the last 200 bushels because I was there, and at the very tip of the bag, it was on kind of a hill. The water kind of migrated down, and there was a little bit of a sour odor. So we took a $25 discount on the last little bit. We would have blended it off, but the last little bit went to the local elevator instead of making that long haul, an
yeah,
hour and 10
full.
minutes
Yeah.
away. So it was just a small sample size and didn't smell very good. It wasn't damaged. It grated sour on odor. So
And last question, Jeff, and we'll move on. Any insurance implications in a bag?
I actually just asked my agent. We didn't do anything, but you can get your insurance should cover it as part of your inventory insurance, but that's a special rider. Most farms have that. If you have insurance, you'll insure your crop as it comes in. It usually wavers up and down depending upon the time of year, but they will insure the grain. And I know Zoe actually talked about that. Hers came under her blanket policy. They didn't seem to distinguish, but make sure you ask your insurance agent. To be honest with you, not a lot's really I mean, a tornado come and hit it, maybe. What would happen catastrophically? If you break a bag, it sucks, but that's also the solution, right? You jump out there. I think we didn't break an entire bag. We had a client who, again, self-inflicted. They said they left the bag open and took off out of the field, right, to go to the next field and didn't seal it. And the wind got in it, and it was a overfilled bag as it was, and it tore. And he said they just brought two vacs, one on each side, and 8 hours later it was gone. It's just a penalty for being in a hurry in the dark and not doing things probably the way we should. So it can happen, and I've shoveled a lot of grain out from under pits and boots and overflowed bins and all kinds of stuff, and obviously cleaning bins. So it's not the end all be all. It's not for every farm, but I have some personal experience, and now we have clients. And like I said, there are some very good the guys out. Akron's imported from Argentina, and the Argentines bag most of their grain, I think. I mean,
At
maybe
big scale.
big scale, and for various economic reasons. There's a company in Minnesota that makes bags. Lofness makes bags. Akron, a great bagger. I think there are two Canadian companies that sell bagging units into the States. Lots of grain is bagged. The more remote you are, the more bagging we see because just the long lines and the logistics. You get up into the Dakotas. I saw a lot of sunnies being bagged here in the last few weeks. So there's it just has to fit into your operation. It's just like so many things Mike and I teach, it's a tool in the toolbox. We like this one because it's flexible, and even a small farm, if you understand merchandising, can get it paid off pretty quick and have some of the benefits maybe a larger or more well-heeled operation can have.
We
Okay,
can skip
let's
this slide, Jeff, because we already beat these topics up.
beat it to death. There we go.
Yep, no, in a really good way.
Go
So
ahead, Mike.
bin control systems, adding moisture back, and the proper monitoring infrastructure on bins can show a really interesting revenue play. And remoisturizing soybeans is really the classic example. Obviously, the devil's in the details and how you configure your bin and what sort of technical provider you choose. But we've also seen a lot of interesting returns out of that one.
Yeah, I'm seeing what we got for so we're going to talk about the soybean example. We were introduced Farm Shop MFG makes these systems. They're a small company out of Iowa, and we are out at Hefty Field Days and met these guys, and they came and talked. We have when we have class after class, we hang around, and Mike and I'll bring in speakers, and this was one of them. Tony Wendler, the owner, came and talked about this. But we see this on my farm, and this is a trend, right? There are certain trends that we see, and that's driving investment, particularly along these lines. So um, we see a lot of green stems and dry beans. I think it's because of the fungicides. It could also be the varieties. We want to keep these plants green as long as we can, adding seed size, weight, have you, and we're all the time, right? And every time we're getting these, every year it seems to be getting worse. We're getting these overly dry beans because we can't get the harvesting isn't timely enough because we can't run the green stems through the combine well enough. We've had guys talk about getting smaller headers or bigger combines to grind green stems, which is one of the solutions, be it an expensive one. But the math on these things, and I just talked to them last night. I got an update. So we got a cost update here. But if you got an $11 bean price, which is pretty close where we are right
Yeah,
now,
pretty close.
yeah, we got an 8% moisture bean. We could deliver 13% without a discount, so up to 13%, right? So that's 5% on those $11 beans. That's 55 cents a bushel. That's how we look at it. It's just we can sell water weight. I can remember as a kid standing there with a high pressure hose in an overhead loadout bin spraying wheat that was too dry with water. That is illegal now, but at the time it was not. That is adulterating grain. I'm not telling you to go do that, mind you. And I've got lots of stories in the commercially of things they were
Oh
dust
yeah.
controlling with, right? But that's real money, right? So 55 cents. Um, I don't know. Let's throw that on a 20,000 bushel bin because where you put this, there's a art to doing this. That's over $10,000 in a year to go from eight. Now, what we learned, and we love Tony, and if you guys, anybody wants to send us an email and get the contact, Tony's an engineer at heart, and he came and talked to us about the details of what it really needs to make it work. I mean, it's hard to make it work in South Dakota if there's no humidity or everything's frozen, right? It takes humidity, it takes time. Everything can't be froze, but you can rehydrate soybeans relatively effectively, and you've got to have it controlled. And the nice part is when the humidity jumps up at 2 a.m., these fan systems will click on, and they know where you want it to go, and they know how, they're monitoring where that frontier of moisture is moving through the bin, so you don't have spoilage. There's a whole bunch of things that have to be right. You can't have really big bins. We have approved a number of these bins or have, kind of signed off with some friends of ours. Yeah, that makes sense because if you can earn the carry, like we talked about in the previous example, and condition the beans, now we can afford a bin. And a bag won't do this, right? So we like getting these beans into isolated systems. Beans don't have to have near the conveyance speed that a corn system has. And getting the beans out of the corn system has helped some of our clients when we look about efficiency and not mixing grain, causing FM. So there's some real money that can be had in doing this. You really can't rehydrate corn. We do have a client, I haven't talked to him here recently. You get really dry wheat in the far west, Pacific Northwest. It's not uncommon to get 10% wheat or lower. Um, you got to be careful, right? Because the wheat wants to expand the same way with the beans, right? You got to make sure you've got the bin set up so it can handle that. There's a little bit of engineering and things that can happen, but it does work on wheat for sure. You just have to have the right conditions and the right technology. It's a technology improvement, and on soybeans, I think it's because we keep getting green stems and too dry. The number one thing we see, and we tell others shrink in corn, is the corn is over dried in the bottom of these big bins. And so really getting in here and understanding that so we're not pulling, 12 moisture corn or 10 moisture corn, that's over dried versus what you can deliver. And that over dried corn breaks up into FM, and FM comes out of the weight when you grade corn. So these systems are not expensive. I talked with Tony the other night. He said an entire system's like $2,800. So that's Tony's system. I think now all the major bin companies, I believe, have systems. They can get a lot more pricey. So contact your local bin company. I know AGI is doing a demonstration again with Zoe on a bin for them, but you got to have the right bin. You got to have drying floor. There's a whole bunch of things that happen. Fan capacity, vent space, It's if you have to go and put in a floor in a bin, well, then the cost gets, is a lot higher. Out west, that is one of the challenges because a lot of these wheat bins in the Pacific Northwest actually don't have fans or don't have floors in them because their corn grain is always dry. So it's, there's a lot of little pieces. But again, it's super high. It's a relatively low cost, wildly high return, right? In our example, it's a 3x payback. It's 300% in a year. So when you think of all the things you want to invest in, we like this one. We like drying bins that are smaller and in crops that need to be well managed. And we're talking about the big crops, but there are other crops, right, that need this. Dry beans, I'm sure, are a crop that really needs to be well managed. Seed beans need to be well managed. So lots of places where we don't necessarily have to add a lot of investment, just operate more and more in the detail and really make a lot of money. Mike, what do you got any questions here?
No, there's one, but we'll answer on the next slide. So
Okay.
we can probably cruise to the next slide. As Jeff mentioned, you can retrofit those bins. Bin design is short and wide, no more than 7 rings. And also maybe affords you also in terms of being opportunistic here to maybe buy some local used bins that kind of fit that configuration. And like as Jeff just said, even we talked about a 50 something cent example, but even if you could consistently get 20 or 30 cents per bushel, these are extremely compelling returns. So that whole idea of thinking about how to, in essence, process your beans, it makes those specific bin infrastructure viable. Any more points on bin structure, Jeff, in your discussions with Tony beyond the short, wide, and 7 rings and other things to think about?
Yeah, I'm going to tell this example very quickly because I see we're really cruising on time and we can go
Mhm.
over on ourselves. But
Yeah, we can go a little bit over, no
yeah,
problem. These are great questions.
so what happens in a soybean crushing plant is the beans come in, they get dehulled, um, they get crushed, and the meal comes through, and they smash them down, right? Bean smashing, and they run hexane through the mash, and hexane dissolves the oil, and that mix moves back, and then eventually they take high pressure steam and they toast that meal to drive off the last of the hexane. The hexane's reusable; it keeps getting recycled. It stays in a plant, and they drive that out. And you know what they do? They use steam to add water. So if you give them an 8% bean, they're going to turn around and they manage that meal moisture to the second decimal when they load a car or a boat or barge or whatever. There's somebody's job is to keep the moisture right at spec on the meal. So the commercials are adding water via processing, which is legal, to the meal side of this, and that's how they're making money. They call that the kicker. If they can buy dry beans from you and load the meal and push water back in it through high temperature steam, they sell water, and that's how they're working in, and that's what they call the kicker in the crushing side. So if you one of the things we teach in class is how the other side makes money and how to understand that and how to make sure as much money sticks onto the farm side as makes sense and how to find what they value as a buyer and so you can mutually find value. So quick story about how the other side makes money from your over dry soybeans.
They love it. Trust me. And, they're not, paying you as
I'm
with
gonna
otherwise. So
go ahead, Mike. I'm gonna apologize. I've got a bit of a cold, so
yeah,
I'm
no
dying.
problem. So, the last at least operational one is something we're seeing emerging in fertilizer. And you're seeing a lot of the wholesale fertilizers just being increasingly interested and open to direct to farmer sales. I know ADM made a big splash, I think it was a couple years ago, and they said they were going to do that. So some of your retailers have been forced to be more flexible, and y- with all the strip till that's going on and other tillage practices, it tends to give you a little more control on your fertilizer sourcing. So we've been looking at ways to take advantage of this. Obviously, you have the trucking and storage as well, but we'll be talking about maybe ways to think about fertilizer storage. And also the way you're out there in the field and the way you broadcast and that sort of thing gives you sort of increased control over how you source your fertilizer. And certainly location is going to be part of the key to this. But we'll go through an example of some folks, and I would say with probably at least half of our retained customers, we're really forcing them to think about this because this is another instance of very real money in how this nets out. Not without complication, not without sometimes circumstance and timing coming into play in this, but it's real money if you can make it work, even for a small percent of what you need, if timing is a good fit. So,
Yeah, and what you're going to see here, what you see in this group is we've had a couple changes, right? We've got a willingness to sell wholesale to the farm, excuse me, and we also have a wildly, driven increase in farmer application, be it strip till or broadcast capability. So, and of course, farms are getting larger and have more capabilities, but this space is relatively untapped,
yeah.
even for some very large farms that we work with. So when we sat down and with a large farm in central Minnesota and they said, we want to build a big bin, we were like, no, you need to think about fertilizer. Oh, that's three. Mine usually come in three. Excuse me for my coughing fit here.
You're doing a good job of mitigating it. So,
Um, right. So in this example, it was a very unique example. This is in central Illinois. And we've got lower cost fertilizer because we're not the local fertilizer retailer is not handling the fertilizer. We're moving them out of the supply chain. In this case, we're going to take the grain from central Illinois to St. Louis, which is a barge loading facility. So that's kind of the natural way grain wants to flow in that area. It wants to flow to the river and to the south. So grain is worth more in St. Louis than in their local market.
yeah, this is south of Springfield too. So, not all central Illinois is created equal, but this part of the state definitely
Right.
will flow to the river a bit more.
We could eliminate some local hauling, right? If it's the haul from the farm or the field to the local grain elevator. Instead, we move it straight down towards that. So we call that a freight spread. Um, we are opening new markets or can go. There are times we have seen where the nets of these are so large that we could take the grain to a market where we actually get less for the grain and still make it work because the nets are so high on the fertilizer. You run it out per bushel. Um, and then some of this grain is, or some of this fertilizer is already backhauled, but the value of that backhaul is sitting in the retailer slot instead of your own slot. And it's not necessarily that you have to do it yourself. You can insert yourself into this space, but this was a very eye-opening whiteboard moment with a client where we sat there and all right, we're gonna, sit in his office and we got quotes for phosphate, locally phosphates in St. Louis, which is about an hour and some change away by truck. And then we got, trucking rates and we sat there and calculated what it was incrementally going to cost us to haul it back, really dug into the details. And I think everybody sitting there was surprised, but there were some complications. So let's
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
going here.
And most river terminals on the grain side have something within a mile or two as a fertilizer terminal too. So here was the actual math that we're discussing. So, just 45 minutes south of Springfield, Illinois. I think it went to Alton, if I remember correctly, but just to get a little more specific. Um, in this specific instance, not netting out the freight, but it was 30 cents more to go to the river versus the local haul to the elevator. And if you, as Jeff said, if you pocketed all the value of the fertilizer loaded in your truck at that river, which in this case I think was like a mile down the road, the net savings was about $30 a short ton, so $750 a load, which is 75 cents a bushel. So
We
you
used a
got the
1,000 bushel load just for
yeah,
easy
yeah,
math.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So now that said, it was 18 cents more to make that haul on the original grain side, and a little bit more. Obviously, you're spending more the loaded truck coming back, so you gotta put some realistic math on that. But net of everything, it was about an 80 cent per bushel run. And again, in this specific instance, he does not have the ability for to store it, but had ability to use it, right away and could milk that run for a while that situation played out. But yeah, I mean, come on, that's the where can you pocket an opportunity like that by thinking out of the box? So it's thinking more and more like that is can be extremely interesting for certain folks depending upon where they're located, and how to take advantage of it.
We're probably high here, but we also realized that we were challenged to get the trucks unloaded at once the trucks got home back to the farm. And so, but um, here's this list of challenges we talked about. Like we need a place to go. Like if we can get the trucks to turn relatively well, get the fertilizer off the trucks. But if I looked at our ability to store some fertilizer versus storing grain, clearly the fertilizer was going to pay way better, right? Just so if I only have if I'm going to put up 120,000 bushel bin and it's going to cost me something close to $400,000, should I be putting that into some kind of storage for fertilizer? It's not that the bin was a bad investment. It's just this one is for this particular farm is so much interesting just because of where they're located. The fertilizer is coming up the river. It's cheaper where they're going, and the grain is more valuable because it wants to go down the river, and that helped that particular part of the country, that particular piece of the puzzle. Timing is a problem, though, right? Because if we want to spread fertilizer in the fall, well, you really want to be storing grain in the fall. So timing's an issue. This farm does a lot of strip tilling, so it doesn't work on every bushel. If you're going to put fertilizer into some kind of facility at the farm, it's not free, right? It's got a cost. Um, no matter what, it was going to slow down the trucks. Now we weren't doing a lot of long hauling. It depends upon the time of year, but it's definitely going to slow your trucking capacity if you've got to go down, pick up, stop, pick up fertilizer. It's a slower trip back loaded, that kind of thing. Um, and I'm trying to remember what the farm controlled applications are, but I think it's just about when you want to do it, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and if you're going to and trying to get it blended correctly, if you need to do blends, obviously, again, it's a change, right? It's a fun. We see these changes are getting more. It's twin bin or tri bin applicator systems, both on the strip till rigs and on the broadcast spreaders. So now you can keep your P, your K, and maybe a micros pack. Um, and that's technology that is getting better and better and getting more viable for farms or custom applications. So we have a number of clients and farms that are doing various portions of this. And I think this is one, again, what makes our top four investments clearly, but it's very specific and you gotta hustle. Being a merchant, and really making, controlling the things that you can control and add value to your farming operation. But it's kind of a merger between your grain and your fertility, and we see it pretty regularly in various forms, and it's not every type of fertilizer, and it's not every moment in time when it works, but when it works and you got your eyes open, it can be awfully lucrative on basically the same investment. The question is I think we have two clients that are out hunting fertilizer storage capacity today. They're looking for those older facilities that aren't are going to retire from maybe call it commercial use, and they're out there or looking for ways. We've got a couple that are using call them fully depreciated uh, pole bin structures, knowing that the fertilizer is going to finish them off eventually. But the math is so overwhelming that for now that's what they're going to do. Okay,
Yeah.
Mike,
And
take four.
the last one's an easy one, but an important one. I was listening. I don't know if any of you folks listen to Farm for Profit, but Jace Young from Legacy Farmer was on there a couple of days ago, and it was one of the better Farm for Profits I've ever heard. And he spoke at great length about all the convergence of all these as in modern farming, all the various areas of expertise you're needing, and all the challenge it is in managing all that. And you obviously know. your capabilities as your group and where your strengths and weaknesses are. But there's a long list of things that are staring you in the face day to day that you manage. That is an incredibly impressive list relative to any other business that's out there. And again, being largely managed by a pretty small group of people: agronomy, finance, managing teams, all kinds of other things, and of course, the space that we cover in risk management. We are finding, in fact, I was speaking to we had a farmer sign up today in the Delta, and he'd mentioned, my ag education just didn't cover, where farming is today, and we're hearing that a lot from a range of most ag universities, and that's quite frankly, I think, endemic to education and secondary education as a whole. The world is moving fast, and there's lots of different ways that you can. Add to your knowledge, and it's really more the time and the focus than it is the money. I know, like in our specific example, it's not necessarily what we charge, it's just how much you're going to roll your sleeves up to learn. But this is, if you can build knowledge assets that can pervade up and down your teams and be world class at things, that is an absolutely fantastic investment that will keep giving year after year after year with an amazing return.
For those of you who don't know, Mike is a very talented investor in lots of other spaces outside of ag, and his last 10 years have been spent in some of that early stage finance of ag ventures. Um, he and I get the same question: what should I invest in? And it doesn't matter whether it's a farm or someone, where should we be investing in? I always say the number one thing you can invest in is yourself. It will always pay the highest return. It's generally not that expensive. It's not a fancy stock. It's not, platinum or gold. It's yourself. And that has played out as we grew out this business. And we keep saying, hey, somewhere I have a dream that, we would come out with a 2-year advanced ag degree, that, ag Agris Academy teaches the merchandising and best practice and risk management. Maybe it's legacy farm, and Jay's teach, the advances on the balance sheets and the financial statements and the banking side. You definitely want Brian Hefty teaching you agronomy, and Darren. And if you want super high yield, you go hang out with David Hula for a day. And there is just so much education available. It's because, in our opinion, that the schooling side of things hasn't kept up at the speed. And so we have that dream, but we are, I think, a part of that solution on the education side.
And what's great about farming is you can learn by day and do by day and do by night, and so you can apply it very practically day to day, the things that you're learning.
So here's our pitch. We actually teach a class in Masters in Class in Merchandising and Futures. One thing I can promise you is we won't talk at all about anything bull or bear. We won't talk about USDA reports or crops, and we are going to teach skills. We're going to teach the same skills we teach new merchants. This class is a ton of fun. We have a great group already signed up. We're still signing people up, right? We'll start right after Thanksgiving. I highly recommend it. The real investment is for you to sit down and apply yourself. We know this is our 3rd year teaching the class. You will pay for the class during class before you ever even get out of class. The class is 2 nights a week. It's a night class, 2 hours per session. We have an hour Agris After Dark, where we bring in specialists from around the ag community around the U.S. To talk about a subject. I think our first 2 are going to be land prices and banking, and I think we're going to talk about poly market. I think
Yeah, the betting markets and how it's
betting markets.
affecting markets as a whole, voting polls, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, it's a ton
and
of
one
fun.
other point we should put in here: if you can't make it live, it's all recorded, and you have access to us during the class, course of the class, to make sure you're being kept up to speed. So.
So it's a learn by doing. You put your own. We have some stuff we're going to share to you. We have our own computer tracking systems that really get you up to the speed, not from tracking like physical inventory, but tracking your risk and managing it just like we managed it for the large commercials all over the world, and sharing that. And we know we can do it. It's been a great class. It's very rewarding, and you just have to really, the cost is to apply yourself, and then our best students put their farms in them. They schedule office hours one-on-one during the week to go through that and make sure they're really running up to speed. And we've just had great success teaching that, and we've got a great class coming this year. Going to have a lot of new examples this year, particularly as our retained business has grown out over the last 3 years. We just get more and more live examples, and we'll put live examples in right up till the day of class. As things happen, there's always something to learn. It's always a teaching moment out there. So if any of you are interested, you can catch us at our website, agrisacademy.com. I think that might be the next slide. You have that? Oh, no,
No,
we're going to say,
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
agrisacademy.com. You can reach Mike or RJ Kazin. All our information is on the website. Our emails are there. Our phone numbers are there. Mike and I are co-founders, and we love this, and we'd love to have you in the class. Mike, I think we might have some questions.
I think that was it. Yeah, make sure just to scroll all the way down to the bottom on the disclaimer there. No, if there isn't any more questions, again, thank you for those who did. It really enriched that. Jeff and I can talk forever about this, but it's great to see the interaction.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. Thanks for coming. Like I said, if you have questions for Mike and I, you're interested in the class, you're interested in maybe bringing us on into that retained farm program. We still do some of that directly, about a half dozen a year we'll accept for 26 is our kind of our limit. And we go out and we do the public speaking. If you've got some things coming up and you really want us to rattle the cage at an event you're going to be at or you're part of, a group you're a part of. Mike and I love to get out and meet farms and talk around the country, particularly during the winter, because in my case, we're off farming during the summer. Thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it.
And thanks to RJO and StoneX for having us again.
All right. And I want to special thanks here to Jeff and Mike here for and Agris Academy for jumping on this and sharing a lot of insightful information. I personally really enjoyed that segment on bagging. A lot of producers that I work with obviously are still, in the bin phase, but I found that really interesting and insightful. And be sure to check your emails. We'll be sending out a recording of this session as well as letting you know about our next class webinar that we're going to have here in the series that we're hosting here. So again, my name is Michael Sabo with RJO Futures and StoneX. And again, a special thank you here to Agris Academy. If you guys have interest in talking about the futures and options markets, feel free to reach out to me, and certainly reach out to Mike and Jeff here if you'd like to learn more about Agris Academy and their upcoming class here. If you have any questions, just give us a holler.
Thanks, everyone.
That
Thanks,
concludes
guys.
our
Be good.
webinar. You.
Mhm.